Okay, so I'm going to crack on. And as I mentioned to some of the first attendees in the room, I'm going to ask there's a few questions I'm going to ask through the webinar, through the talk, and because it's a webinar, we're going to try and use the chat function to answer those questions. So feel free to just keep banging away on the chat, and there's also a Q&A section if you want to stick any questions in there that we can talk about at the end. The talk itself should be about 35-40 minutes long, and we'll hang around at the end, do some Q&A, and we'll also enable everyone's mics if you want, and we can have a bit of a chat about some of the topics introduced. So about me, yeah, so my name's Tom. I'm head of tech at Morniche. I'm also CTO at Identity, and I'm an associate consultant at a management consultancy firm called Q5. You can find me online there. You can find my Twitter handle there, and I really love it. I really appreciate it if you guys want to tweet and share, take screenshots or take photos of your screens or whatever, and share the content away. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you about psychological safety in high-performing teams, which is a particularly pertinent topic given the dramatic changes that we've no doubt all suffered in our teams over the past month or so. But first, some of these questions that I mentioned. So I'd like to find out how many of you are members of at least one team. So if you're a member of a team, you can just comment in the chat channel there, just post member or something. Great, I can see the answers coming in. So great, so pretty much everyone's a member of at least one team. I'm interested to find out how many of you lead teams, and maybe you lead more than one team. Great. So we've got some team leaders as well. And the final question, how many of you would like to be able to get those teams to a state where they're performing really well? Not only are they performing really well, but they're really happy at the same time. They're really happy in their roles. Excellent. Good to know. So you're in the right place. I'm going to try and give you some proper actionable takeaways out of this talk, out of this webinar, that will help you get to that point. But first, have a look at this boat. This is an Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyer of the United States Navy. This is one of the largest missile destroyers in the world. It's 155 meters long, weighs around 9,000 tons, has engines boasting over 100,000 horsepower, and it has more than 100 missiles and torpedoes on board. If you wanted to buy one, it would cost you $2 billion. I don't, however, think you're allowed to buy one. This is a Cray XE6 supercomputer. This runs at this has 154,000 cores, and it runs at 1.3 thousand teraflops. This particular one is at the National Energy Research Scientific Computing Center in California, and this costs $70 million, which is rather affordable compared to the missile destroyer, and I think you're actually allowed to buy one of these. And these two things, the supercomputer and the missile destroyer, these have something in common. And the thing, or the person they have in common, is this woman. This is Grace Hopper. The ship, the USS Hopper, and the Hopper supercomputer are named after her. And Grace is one of my leadership role models. She was born in 1906. She gained a PhD in maths from Yale, became a professor at Vassar University, and tried to join the Navy in 1940, but was rejected because she was 34 years old. Subsequently, she began her computing career in 1944 when she worked on the Harvard Mark I team. And she was part of the team that popularized the concept of machine-independent programming languages. And that led to COBOL. This concept that programming languages should be readable and writable by humans, not just machines. Throughout her lifetime, she was granted 40 honorary degrees and became US Navy Rear Admiral. And she died in 1992. She also found the first actual computer bug. This is the Mark II computer at Harvard, which incidentally weighed 25 tons and ran at 8 hertz. This is 1947, and she was trying to diagnose a fault when she found a moth in relay number 70. Took it out and stuck it onto her notes, and you can see the actual notes there saying the first actual case of a bug being found in a computer. She was a champion of improvement. She was a champion of positive change. She used to say, humans are allergic to change. They love to say, we've always done it this way. She had a clock on her office wall that ran counterclockwise, just because you can. There's no reason not to. And she emphasized the importance of people, managing people and being human. That's why she's featured in this talk. She highlighted the point that leadership is far more important than just management. Leadership and management are part of the same need to drive performance, the same need to operate an organization. But leadership and management would coexist, but they're not the same thing. You manage things and you lead people. And of course, she's absolutely right. This is something I knocked up to try and demonstrate that point. We don't lead things or manage people. We lead people and manage stuff. We manage compliance, we manage health and safety, we manage costs, risks, projects. We lead people through vision, motivation, taking accountability and responsibility, celebrating success, coaching, and mentoring. Management, therefore, is part of leadership because people need a safe environment to operate and work in. They need to know what to do first, how to do it, and what not to do. That's fundamental. And if you don't or can't manage stuff like costs, risks, workloads, and priorities, the team can't work effectively. You're not an effective leader, and you won't have the trust of the team. And trust is absolutely key to being a leader of a team. A team can't operate effectively in an environment where the things are not managed well. You absolutely must get the basics right. But the good news is that's the easy bit. Leadership is far, far more difficult and far larger in scope. Everyone manages stuff, but not everyone leads. And this is possibly one of the most important things we do as leaders, and it's rarely mentioned. We ensure psychological safety for members of the team. This is also known as safety culture. And although Grace never used this term, because the term came later, Grace called this term belonging in a team. Fundamentally, psychological safety is about being able to speak up, whether it's speaking up about a critical safety issue or the behavior of a senior member of staff. And whilst I hope that all of you work in environments where you could raise a health and safety issue, like this ladder's broken, then, but it's possible that you might feel differently about speaking up about the poor behavior of a senior leader or similar. Now this is Chernobyl. This is 1986. And this is where the term safety culture originally stems from, or part of the place where it stems from. In Russia at the time, economic and political interests came far before safety. Hierarchy, authority, and blame for mistakes were the typical management style. Now, Chernobyl had an inherently unsafe design. The design of the plant was inherently bad, but there was also a fear of authority and certainly no safety culture. What happened with the disaster was that there was a safety test designed, or a safety test to simulate a power cut to the building. After all, the controls for the power plant need to have power. Now, this test had been attempted many times before, but never quite successfully. On this day, it was delayed, and the second shift team came on. And the second shift team were less familiar with the system, and they were concerned that they wouldn't be able to run the test effectively. But because there was a fear of authority and no safety culture, they couldn't and didn't raise their concerns. The test was executed, it went wrong, and because the team didn't know exactly what they were doing, that led to a catastrophic series of events culminating in 2 explosions. One steam explosion, which destroyed the reactor, and a subsequent second nuclear explosion, which is the disaster we all know about. Now, as a result of this disaster, 31 people died, but it's estimated that around 4,000 people died as a result long term over this disaster. Now, you guys might not build nuclear power plants and be responsible for things that can result in nuclear catastrophes, but whatever you build, it can be crucial to people's lives, whether you're building retail websites or banking apps or house controls. Whatever you're building is crucial because it's crucial to people's livelihoods, it's crucial to people's way of living. So it's important to get it right. Now, skipping forward a little further, this is where the psychological safety term first came about. It was first coined in 1999 by Dr. Amy Edmondson. She's a professor at Harvard Business School, and the term refers to a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. That is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. As Amy was studying clinical teams in hospitals, and she was studying the differences between high-performing and low-performing teams. And she was looking at clinical outcomes of the 2 sets of teams, the high and low performers. And she was looking at data of mistakes that were made. And she was looking at the number. So when she looked at the number of mistakes that were made by high-performing and low-performing teams, she found that high-performing teams made more mistakes and low-performing teams made fewer mistakes. Now, on the face of it, that doesn't make any sense at all, because high-performing teams shouldn't make more mistakes. And so she looked deeper into the data because she was convinced it was wrong. As it turns out, it wasn't wrong, it was just slightly misleading, because what the truth is that high-performing teams admitted more mistakes. The low-performing teams still made those mistakes, maybe more, but they didn't admit them. So the high-performing teams were allowed to admit that they made mistakes to each other. They were able to express their creativity, talents, and skills without that self-silencing or self-censoring. The point about psychological safety is that it's about being fearless in a team. That doesn't mean fearless in a dumb kind of, I'm not scared to base jump off this cliff, but in a, I actually have nothing to fear of being on this team. Psychological safety involves a great deal of trust, but it's far, far more than trust in practice. Now, I want you to think about the best team that you've been part of, your favorite team, the team you really enjoyed being part of. Now, chances are that team weren't great because they were skilled, intelligent, hardworking, although maybe they were. Chances are that team was good because they trusted each other. They felt safe to be part of the team, and they felt safe to be themselves on that team, like these guys. Now, think about maybe one of the worst teams you've been on, the teams that maybe you didn't feel safe to be part of, and maybe people didn't trust or rely on each other. I think whatever your politics, it's safe to say that the people on this team are not feeling psychologically safe. There's not a great deal of trust, safety, or interpersonal risk-taking on this team. It's safe to say that they probably haven't got each other's backs. And if you're on this team, you're not going to admit to the rest of the team that you're struggling, or you're having a problem with something, or you've made a mistake. So we know it feels good. We know it feels good to be part of a psychologically safe team, but why is it actually good? Why does it matter for an organization? Why shouldn't we just have teams that are psychologically unsafe and high performing? Well, this is what Google tried to work out. This is from Google's Project Aristotle. This is research into what makes high performing teams. This is back from 2012. This is and it's Aristotle because of the Aristotle's quotation, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Google did a load of research, and I mean, Google are amazing because they're so big they can study themselves. So they were looking for the factors that made high performing teams, and they found these original four. And starting from the bottom, they found that teams who knew that their work mattered and created change helped high performance. They found it was important for team members to have meaning, that work should be personally important to them. They knew that team members needed clarity and structure. And this is where the management comes in. This is where team members need to know what to do, how to do it. And they need to be able to depend on each other. They need to be able to count on each other's promises to get things done. But what they were finding is that even though these four aspects were really important, they were still missing something. There was something about the high performing teams that they still hadn't identified. And one of the members of the research team found Amy Edmondson's paper and decided to test psychological safety. And it turns out that every single high performing team in Google had a high degree of psychological safety. Now, that's not the only data. That's not the only evidence, rather. This is from the State of DevOps report 2019. And this report from last year demonstrates that an organizational culture that optimizes for information flow, trust, innovation, and risk sharing is predictive of performance. So not only can psychological safety prevent disasters such as Chernobyl, but it contributes to software delivery performance, organizational performance, and productivity. And I'm going to show you that in these next two charts. These are from that same report. You can see that a culture of psychological safety at the top there is crucial for productivity across an organization. This is data across an organization. Other useful things are useful, easy to use tools, internal search, low technical debt, good work recovery, but psychological safety is critical. Now, if you look solely at software delivery teams, it's also true. Software delivery teams need a clear change process. They need lightweight change processes. They need code maintainability, continuous delivery. They need to use the cloud. They need to have low burnout. But crucial to everything still remains psychological safety. And more people are picking up on this. I don't know who's read this book. This is the sequel to the Phoenix Project. But in this sequel to the Phoenix Project, the Unicorn Project, Gene Kim identifies 5 things called the 5 ideals: locality and simplicity, which describes software architecture; focus, flow, and joy, which describes the way of working; improvement of daily work, which is like Kaizen, continuous improvement. Number 5 is customer focus, like the agile customer focus, and 4 is psychological safety. So my point here is that more and more people are identifying psychological safety as a crucial factor in high-performing teams. So we know we want it, we know we like it, but we don't know what it looks like. How do we know if our team is psychologically safe? Well, what you can do is you can simply measure agreement with these statements. Things like, can you take a risk? Can you ask for help? Does your team find the root systemic cause to issues rather than blame people? Can you break the rules? And if you're going to break the rules, do you do it on purpose, or you do it because you're just lazy? Now, what I actually have that I'll share at the end of this talk, but I've got baseline data on this. So I've built this into a Typeform survey, and I've got baseline data on this that has been filled out by multiple organizations, multiple teams in different organizations. And you can use that Typeform for yourself, for your team, measure agreement with these statements on a scale of 1 to 5, and get a benchmark or baseline for your team right now. What you can also do with the other baseline data is compare your team against other teams in wider organizations. Not that we're being competitive, but it's nice to know. And it's what also is good about doing that is that you can keep coming back to these. You can keep answering these questions. You can do this every 3 months, 6 months, every year, and make sure you're keeping on track. But these questions are crucially important to determining if your teams are psychologically safe. So if we know where we are, so we know we want it, we know it's good, we've worked out if we're psychologically safe, but we know we want to improve. So how do we do it? Well, as a leader, this is entirely on you. You can't simply tell people that they operate in a safe environment. You need to prove it by using awareness, empathy, humility. But I'm going to talk you through some of the basic things you can do to foster psychological safety in your teams. First of all, get the basics right. This comes back to management. Teams have to know what they need to do on a daily basis. They have to know how to do it. They have to know what tasks to hit first, what their priorities are, and how to do their work, and what good looks like, what done looks like. These are basics. So get the basics right first of all. Secondly, break the golden rule. The golden rule being treat others as you would they should do unto you. But don't do that. It's nonsense. Don't treat other people the way you want to be treated, because they're not you. Treat other people the way they want to be treated. And you can ask your teams how they want to be managed, how they want to interact, how they want to work with you. Be inclusive in decision making. Now, this doesn't mean that you need you don't need consensus-driven decision making. You don't need everyone to agree, but you do need to make sure that everyone is included in decisions that affect the team. And where possible, allow teams to make their own decisions. Provide autonomy for your team members. Define the team values and behaviors. This is really crucial. When you're building a team, or when you're coming onto a team, you need to determine what the team values are and what the behaviors are that represent those values. Now, what's really crucial is to allow the team to come up and distill those values themselves. You can't decide what the team values are and then tell your teams what their values are. That's not going to work. Now, if you work with your team and workshop what we believe our values as a team are and what those behaviors are, they own those values. They're what they came up with. Chances are they're going to be the exactly same the same behaviors and values that you would have wanted out of your teams anyway. Hold retrospectives and do it properly, and don't just do retros for failures as well. Do retros for successes. When there's a big win, a big success, have a retro and find out what made that happen, what made that happen well. Treat every incident as a learning opportunity, and state it as such. When something happens and something goes wrong, say, well, great, this is a great opportunity to learn. Let's do it. And in that vein, admit fault first. Now, this is why there's a picture of the red arrows behind this, because I was once talking to a Red Arrows commander a few years ago, and one of the first things he does after a sortie or mission, when his team get out of the planes and walk over the runway into the hangar or wherever they sit, they go and do a debrief. And the first thing he does in this debrief is admit one mistake that he made. And he's going to find a mistake, and he'll admit a mistake that he made. Now, what that means is that the rest of his team now feel safe in order to admit the mistakes that they made. Not only do they feel safe in doing so, but they really want to, because they want to emulate their leader. So model admitting mistakes. Invite feedback. And in fact, don't invite feedback, because the word feedback is awful. Ask for advice. Feedback is is often so negatively focused. It's like asking, what did I do wrong? Asking for advice is asking, what can I do better? Showing vulnerability and emotion is also really important because if you're going to ask your teams, if you're going to expect your teams to be psychologically safe and admit mistakes, you need to show that it's okay to demonstrate vulnerability and demonstrate emotion. It's okay to demonstrate when you're finding things hard, or when you're stressed, or when you're up against it and you think you're going to miss a deadline. It's okay to show those emotions. Also, though, be firm with negative behaviors, and by negative behaviors I mean anything from turning up to meetings late, or being aggressive or abusive with other members of the team, or talking over people. Whatever those negative behaviors are, be really firm with those. And that's not the point of this, is not necessarily to eradicate those negative behaviors, but to show the other members of your team that behavior like that won't be tolerated, and they won't suffer the consequences of negative behaviors of other members of the team. It's to make the rest of the team feel safe, not necessarily eradicate the negative behavior. Number 10 is financial and job security. I didn't used to have this in here, but I've put it in recently because I've learned how important this is for psychological safety in your teams. So financial security enables focus. So if members of your team are financially relatively secure, they can focus on their work. They can deliver work faster because they're not stressed about money worries. Job security, on the other hand, on the flip side, allows better risk taking, higher innovation, because if they know they're not going to lose their job, people can take more risks. And you want them taking risks because that's the only way that innovation can take place. Finally, be patient, because this takes a long time. This is not a one shot run through these 11 steps and get a psychologically safe team win. This is a constant behavior. This is something that you change as a leader, and you constantly do. This is not something that you just tick a box and you're done. So this can take weeks, months, probably years to get right. And it refers to all those tiny micro interactions that you have with members of your team. So it's a constant behavior, and it requires that you acknowledge when you get it wrong. And whilst you're building this, it's worth recognizing that there are actually 4 stages of psychological safety. This is from a book, you can see it there, Timothy R. Clark's book called 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. And the 4 stages are, firstly, inclusion safety. This is just being included on a team. This is just being a team member. This is number 1. We long to belong. Humans need to be accepted before they can be heard. So this is just being safe to be a member of the team. The second stage is learner safety, which is a bit more progressed. So this connects to the need that we all have to learn and grow. And this means being able to ask questions, give and receive feedback, experiment, and make mistakes. Thirdly, contributor safety. Now, at this stage, you're feeling more safe as a member of the team, and you're able to participate, contribute ideas, suggestions, use your talents, and try to make a difference to the team. The final stage is challenger safety. This is, you've got to have a very secure, safe team in order for people to feel, for everyone on the team to feel safe to do this. And it means being able to challenge the way we do things, to look around and say, you know what, it's time to change. I have an idea about how to make things better. It's about challenging other people's ideas. It's about challenging the ideas of the leader of the team. What's interesting at this is that if someone on the team goes straight to level 4 without going through stages 1 to 3 and starts challenging other members of the team without them feeling safe, it feels awful. It feels like the team is fragmented and it doesn't work. Once the teams move through this stage, and in fact, through varying degrees of these phases, team members are happy. And as we know, happiness precedes success. Very few high-performing teams are unhappy. Teams aren't happy because they're high-performing. High-performing teams are high-performing because they're happy. Now, many of you will probably be familiar with this, the Tuckman model from 1965. This goes back to this patience thing. It takes at least generally about 6 months for a team to enter high performance, usually more like 18 months or more. And all teams go through these stages. All teams go through the forming stage where they find roles and they bond with each other. Then there's this crazy storming phase where strong leadership is required to set direction, strategy, roles, values, and behaviors. This storming phase is where you go to that value setting, workshopping exercise, and you set those values and behaviors and set them in stone so that you can get to the norming phase. This is where teams become more autonomous, self-directive. And it's the norming phase where you can begin to build strong psychological safety and a culture of experimentation, because it's only through that culture of experimentation that teams could get to the performing stage. And it's at the performing stage where you've got continuous improvement. And what generally happens here is that teams will get into a norming phase, maybe get to performing, but actually any small change can send teams cycling back through this storming, norming, and forming phase. Because if someone joins the team, leaves the team, that small change is enough to send the team back here, and they might cycle back through quickly, back up to norming and performing. But this is worth remembering, that teams will always cycle through here, and what you want to get to is a stable norm and perform phase where performing maintains psychological safety. But crucially, is psychological safety enough on its own? And no, it isn't. It's not enough just to have psychological safety in a team. Now, what these four quadrants represent are, if you look at psychological safety on the y-axis on the left, and motivation and accountability along the x-axis and along the bottom, increasing psychological safety up, more motivation and accountability as you move right. Now, you look at that bottom left quadrant, that's where you've got low psychological safety, but also low motivation and accountability. And it's in this zone where people are apathetic. People don't care. They don't feel necessarily safe in their role, but they're not motivated and they don't have accountability to actually deliver anything. So nothing happens here. Nothing happens in the bottom left corner of this. If you move up into higher psychological safety, but you've still got low motivation and accountability, you're in this comfort zone. So teams in here are happy. They feel safe as part of the team. They can trust each other, rely on each other. That's great. But they're not being asked to deliver. They're not motivated to deliver. Now, being in part of this team can feel like a fairly high performing team, and it will feel nice, but you're not actually delivering much. But if we go over onto the bottom right corner, this is where you've got high motivation, high accountability, but low psychological safety. And the sort of teams that exist in this quadrant are things like sales teams, high pressure, highly competitive sales teams, where people are sacked if they don't hit the targets. Now, they might look externally like high performance teams. They don't feel like high performance teams. You might be achieving quite a lot, but you've probably got an awful lot of churn. You've got a high churn rate. You've got people leaving and joining the team quite frequently. You've got people going back into that storming and forming phase. So where we want to get to is this top right corner. We want to get to high performance. So in order to do that, we need to build psychological safety, and we've already seen how to do that. But the crucial thing here is to make sure that we are not moving from apathy into anxiety and up. We've got to build psychological safety before we build a high degree of motivation and accountability, because the risk is that we move teams into the anxiety quadrant, and that's where, as I said before, we have high churn. We have people leaving the team, and when someone leaves a team, chances are they're not coming back. But people don't leave a team in a comfort zone. So if you're building a new team, or if you're coming into a dysfunctional team, try to get teams into this comfort zone first, and then move them into high performance by giving them motivation and increased accountability. What's also crucial to remember here is that it's incredibly hard to move up in psychological safety. And it takes a long time, but it's incredibly easy to move down, like snakes and ladders. One mistake, one negative behavior of a member of the team or mistake as a leader can leave the team crashing down into apathy or anxiety. So be very careful to bring people up slowly and try to not make any mistakes. But if you do make mistakes, if you're in the comfort zone, then people will move back into apathy. If you're in high performance zone, people may move into anxiety, and that's where you can lose people. Now, what's nice about this quadrant is that you can ask your teams, if you explain to your teams what this is and explain the concepts, you can ask your teams to actually place themselves and the rest of the team onto this quadrant, mark themselves on it and say, well, at the moment I feel about here in the middle of the comfort zone, or at the moment I feel about here in the middle of apathy. Now, what you generally find is that people put themselves more over to the right than the rest of their team members. But generally people are fairly honest about this. And what is a nice exercise to do is ask, where were you 6 months ago? And where are you now? And where do you want to be? And ask the whole team where they want to be. And obviously, most of the team will say they want to be in a high performance zone. And so you can explicitly talk to your team about how to get into that high performance zone and work towards increasing psychological safety, increasing that motivation and accountability, and pushing forward into the high performance zone and coming back to this quadrant again and again and saying, where are we now? Where are we now? Now, psychological safety is still unusual. It's still not the norm, which is why psychological safety is one of the few things that can endow a competitive advantage. So even if you're not in charge of the team, you can begin to foster these behaviors and this culture by doing 3 different things. First thing to do is to frame work as a learning problem, not an execution problem. Work is a learning problem. The outcome of work is knowing how to do it better next time, not just delivering product X. Secondly, acknowledge your own infallibility, acknowledge your mistakes, and acknowledge that you don't know everything. You might be an expert, but you still get things wrong. If you admit it when you do, you allow your team members to do the same. And finally, model curiosity. Ask a lot of questions. Asking questions creates a need for voice, because by asking questions, people on your team have to speak up. Grace got rejected by the Navy in 1940, but nobody had to tell her that she was leadership material in order for her to become the amazing leader that she did. You don't have to be told you're a leader to become a leader. So thanks for listening to me today. We're just about to wrap up. This link down below will link you to this slide deck. In fact, a slightly outdated version of the slide deck, so I need to update that. And other resources from this talk, including the baseline data and the survey. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to see if I can get into here, open up the chat, and see if I can unmute everyone and we can have some Q&A. So if I can work out how to unmute everyone. Doing it one by one because I don't know how to do it in bulk. Right. I think that's everyone able to talk.
Hello.
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 Hey.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can talk to an actual human being. How's everyone doing? Everyone's very quiet. So has anyone got any questions or any comments from this little session?
That was a great talk. Really good.
Oh, thank you, mate. Thank you.
First time I've heard you speak, actually, Tom.
Yes. Yeah.
Taking loads of screenshots, but I'm not on Twitter. Sorry.
Well, no, that's fine, mate. That's fine. Yeah. Yeah.
Also took those as screenshots. So.
Good. Yeah. So let me have a look back at the chat. So yeah. So that's a good point. As a contractor, much easier to speak up than for permanent staff. That's a really good point there, Steve. Yeah.
I think that's probably been half the reason for my success in leading big teams is I have financial security, so I can say what I like, and a lot of permanent staff in places I worked don't feel the same way and are looking for someone to say what they're thinking, and a lot of the time it's obvious, but to them or to me walking into a team, definitely picked up some tips from your talk, but they're not necessarily able to say what they'd like to say, and I have no off button, so I just say it to their managers or their leaders. Definitely their managers, not their leaders.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've just seen someone's. Nick Brown. Right. So I've got an answer for. I've got something for you there. I'm just trying to find a slide that I skipped in this talk, but so let me find one minute. I've got to come back to that. So actually I need to, because it's hidden, I need to just go up here. Right. You guys can see that screen, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you asked about like rockstar devs. Now, one of the interesting things that came out of the Google research was some stuff that correlated with team effectiveness. Some of these things we kind of know already, like co-location of teammates. Well, we're all working distributed remotely right now, right? So we know that we can do that. You don't need consensus driven decision making. But one of the crucial things that Google found was that individual performance of team members is not important to team effectiveness, i.e., and this dives deeper into the research itself. But what you don't need rockstar devs, you don't need rockstar anyone, and in fact, they can be detrimental to a team. So your question, if I come back to that, self-diagnosed rockstar. I have in the past got rid of those members of my team or of teams, and I think to some degree it can be useful to get rid of those sorts of people from teams, because the other teammates then recognize, they can see that you're strong enough to get rid of those sorts of personalities or behaviors. But primarily, like initially, before just sacking someone, it is about coming down really hard, really firm with those negative behaviors, depending on sort of how they manifest in that team. I don't know if that helps. Excellent, good. So I think Henry Stockdale said, have you got a question? You can feel free to type a question. Oh, that's fine. So while you're doing that, one of the questions that comes up sometimes is how, if you're joining a team, if you're joining a new team as a team member, how do you know if that team is psychologically safe, and if the leader of that team adopts sort of some of these practices to make it a psychologically safe team? And what I've done before is suggest the slide that shows, is your team psychologically safe? Simply ask those questions. So these, I'm going to share my screen again. these questions are actually fantastic questions to ask in an interview as an interviewee. To ask your interviewer, if you make a mistake on this team, is it held against you? Is it safe to take a risk on this team? And things like that, and maybe ask them to grade, rate their response with that statement. So we've still got sort of 5 minutes or so. If anyone would like to ask any other questions, I know this format is slightly odd.
Yeah, Tom, I have a question.
Yeah.
I know that you talked about psychological safety as being able to make mistakes, right? Like psychologically safe teams make more mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things that one of the places my thoughts took me is that there's a difference between, or I think there's a difference between a high uncertainty environment and a low uncertainty environment. Like programming and being a doctor, like a lot of this is relatively high uncertainty, and you have to be able to adjust to new information very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that you don't want psychological safety in low uncertainty environments, because I'm pretty sure we do want psychological safety in all teams. But what would psychological safety look like in a low uncertainty environment?
In low certainty.
Low uncertainty, where there is a clearer right and wrong answer.
Yeah. So I guess that means I guess it depends whether you're thinking about are you thinking about sort of highly regulated environments, or are you thinking about just environments where you know exactly what's going on?
It's more the latter, where it is possible to know exactly what's going on.
Yeah. So I guess you're in teams where it's slightly maybe more operational. You're not necessarily in so much of a product development sort of role because you know exactly what you're trying to build, how you're trying to build it. You're trying to maintain and secure stuff. So to be honest, I would say there's not a great deal of difference. The appetite for risk may be somewhat different. But when I say it's safe to take a risk on this team, there are many different kinds of risks, and risks might be I want to try out I want to try a different language. I want to build this feature in this language because I think it's better, but I might be wrong and I might fail. Or it might be I just want to behave in this way. I want to be a bit different. I want to, we have personal risks, we have technical risks, we have all sorts of different risks. So I would say, because of the scope of risks involved that you can take on a team, it kind of speaks to that.
Gotcha. Thanks. Yeah. So because psychological safety remains being able to be wrong or make a mistake and not be punished, then there's room for maybe creating an environment within this low uncertainty system, which is maybe like an open Q&A forum or something where people can say what they think without fear of being reprimanded for being wrong, so that you can bring everybody's knowledge up as necessary.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, going off slightly, sort of as almost as an indicator of psychological safety. If you see a team where people, like, someone feels safe to grow a massive beard and dye it pink and turn up on the team, chances are that team is psychologically safe. Chances are that team is actually quite high performing, because if that person didn't feel safe to grow a big beard and dye it pink, they wouldn't feel safe to take a technical risk on it.
That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. So we've still got a couple of minutes left. If anyone else has anything else to ask, or any other comments or questions, or where they might find extra resources. Great. So I think we can wrap up. I'm going to show my face again. And yeah, really appreciate you guys for turning up. This is my first ever webinar. I'll be perfectly honest, I much prefer speaking in front of a room full of people, but we're not allowed to do that at the moment. So thanks very much. I'm going to try and I've got a series of these talks. I'm going to be doing a series of talks about high performance operations, high performance delivery, and high performance strategy. So this is my first talk in the series called High Performing Teams. And yes, I will send it to Dom Cummings. Yes, I'm sure he'll appreciate that. Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, guys. It has been recorded. So if you want a copy, then contact me online. If you want any of the resources or anything else, feel free to contact me afterwards via email or Twitter or whatever medium suits you best. So thanks everyone. Yeah, everyone just ping me if you want a copy of anything else. And yeah, thanks everyone for attending. Hope everyone has a good evening, good day. And yes, Nick Brown, they will be at that link, but email me anyway, because I've got more resources than on that link. So yeah, get in touch if you want anything. Everyone have a good evening, have a good day, have a good beer or bourbon, and we'll speak soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.